Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast, hosted by Alison Humphries. The Recruitment Leadership Podcast is here to help those in the recruitment industry gain awareness and understanding on the hot topics faced by those in the business of hiring people. In each episode, Alison Humphries is joined by a fellow expert to offer professional knowledge, insight and advice on the biggest subjects affecting recruitment businesses. It's the podcast to listen to for recruitment business frontrunners seeking expert information from industry-leading advisors. Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.
Hello and welcome to Season 3 of the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. I'm Alison Humphries of Recruitment Leadership, and it's a business that works with recruitment owners and directors to help them achieve their objectives, whether that's substantial growth or more profit or a business event of some kind, or just working more sanely in this competitive market. Now, I'm delighted to be joined today by Ryan McCabe. Ryan is the Chief Executive of Odro, which is a video interviewing platform that's been very successful in the recruitment sector. Hello Ryan, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Alison.
We're going to talk, first of all this morning, about the changing landscape of the recruitment market. So just to give this some context, last week I was talking to a recruitment business owner who's actually been in the industry for a long time, and he started in a new sector. It was the first time he's had to think about his brand and his offering for 20 years. And it was really clear to me from our conversation that he was still working on some 20th century assumptions. So I'll give you some examples. First of all, he still seemed to think it was possible to grow a successful recruitment brand just using telephone calls. So we're both laughing, but there are a number of people out there who do still think like that. Number two, he had an assumption that was based on what I found now to be outdated, in that he thought if you could find a client, give them a great service on one job, get them to use you for all their jobs, and then sit back and wait for the money to roll in the repeat business, that effectively you'd only need maybe 10 clients. Now, when I pointed out to him that since the recession, that doesn't tend to happen anymore, that anyone who is spending substantial amounts on recruitment pretty soon is going to start looking at how they can do it more effectively, more cost effectively, perhaps by bringing in a master service provider, by automating certain processes, by building their own employer brand, or just by having an in-house team. And suddenly your cash cow client has disappeared. I could see this client having a light bulb moment when he realised that things weren't just going to be the same as they'd been in the 20th century. So I thought our listeners would be very interested in hearing us talk about all sorts of innovations, how they've worked, why they failed in some cases, and obviously we're going to start with video interviewing. So in summary, could you just talk us through why you think video interviewing, and the rise of Odro is a good example of that, why you think it's become so current in the recruitment industry?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about the infrastructure and things like that of what's actually helped video progress through. I can go into that later, but I think driving value because of how competitive the market is a very important part of this. So whether it's video or whether it's anything else, it has to drive value to the stakeholders in the process. So the three stakeholders we focus on are the client, the candidate and the consultant that uses it. And if those three people are getting benefit from the change, it will work. If only one of those or only two of those are getting the benefit, it will fall down eventually. So you have to make sure that any change you put in my experience, any change you put into a recruitment business has to please at least those three stakeholders. Otherwise any innovation or anything that you're trying to change could eventually fall down.
Okay, so a lot of the recruitment business owners that I work with have embraced video interviewing as part of their offering, partly because it can shorten the recruitment cycle, very often because it's showing our client a candidate rather than a CV, which sounds fundamental, but actually is a big shift for a lot of people. But it doesn't have to involve a technology platform, does it? Successful innovation can include all sorts of things that aren't just replicating what you did before when you were an employee. So KPIs is a shining example. We've probably both been in businesses where people have simply put up on the board the same KPIs that they worked with when they were a trainee. And there's a question mark there. Are they really relevant anymore? So one of my particular pet hates is CV sent, minutes on the telephone, which is a really blunt instrument. What are your thoughts on KPIs and how they can reflect the current market better? Yeah,
so people, I'm a fan of KPIs. I think when we spoke off air, I think people need to understand what good looks like, and KPIs tell you that. So, but if they are put in to make sure people are working, that's a different tool that you're using there. KPIs should be key performance indicators, and if you don't know what drives performance, don't put the number in there. Why is it 20 calls a day? Why is it 40 calls a day? Why is it 10 candidates? And the reason can't be, as you said, because it worked for me 20 years ago. It doesn't work like that. So for me, I think from I love the fact that the most successful businesses I've seen, their KPIs are built from data. They've looked at their own data. They've looked at when we get a job that has this aspect and this benefit and this, we fill it more. We fill 3 out of 4 of them, or we fill them all. So why aren't we focusing on this? Talking about things that maybe you mentioned it in case you're going to say this, but you mentioned it about people allowing you to go to site. It's not something that's a KPI. You can put that in. How many of your jobs allow you to come on site? That's a great buying signal.
Yeah. So a few years back, I did this piece of work with a client of mine, and we looked at the jobs that we filled. Were there any characteristics that they shared? So as you quite rightly say, Ryan, one of them was the client would allow us to visit them on site. They saw a benefit in that, but at a very practical level, it allowed the consultant to sell that opportunity better and to create a good working relationship. So a site visit was a key factor. The other factor that we found was that all the clients where we went on to fill the job, or the vast majority of them, had agreed to give us interview slots within a week of that initial call. And yes, there was obviously some talking them into that position, making them understand the importance of availability of candidates and not just working on the basis of finding an ideal CV, but running the whole thing like a project. But once we'd identified those characteristics, we could either try to take future clients down that route. Can we come on site? Can we have interview slots? Or deprioritise those clients who simply weren't willing to work that way.
And I think that's a big mistake that traditional agencies that aren't innovating are making, where they say, like, for example, you're talking about these characteristics of a job. To the agencies that are underperforming, a job is a job. Get 20 jobs, get 10 jobs, but there is absolutely no context on what a job is. But if you say, let's say we talk about grading jobs, you have A jobs to C jobs or D jobs, and then you start to, as you say, prioritise or deprioritise those jobs based on your success. I actually don't think it's a difficult thing to work out. It maybe take you a month. But think of how accurate your forecasting can become if you then have priorities in jobs and your KPIs. Instead of saying you need to get 10 jobs, you say no, you need to get 3 A jobs. And you can fill the rest with B jobs, but if you've got 10 jobs and they're all C jobs, we're going to have a problem because you're probably not going to hit your number.
Actually, to extend that thought, if you look at business development calls, if somebody's making rubbish business development calls, doing more of them is actually counterproductive, isn't it? You're just going to annoy more and more potential clients in your community.
The conversions are a very important part of KPIs, I see as well. So we're a tech business, right? So from our tech business, we say, okay, we have identified a client, and then the conversion from identified to conversation is one, and then conversation to demo booked is another, and then demo booked to what we call positive post demo is another, and then they go to close. If, for example, we say, okay, we want to make our team better, if their conversion rate on in conversation to demo is great, but they're not closing, it's usually because their conversion from demo to positive post demo is poor. That's demo training they need. It's not sales training they need. They can get the demos. So why would we train them on cold calling to make the funnel go better? They're good at that. So if you split your KPIs into the funnel and say what parts of the funnel is the recruiter falling down on, are we getting a job on but then we're not getting interviews? Okay, we need better understanding of what the job brief is, and we agree the job brief so the interviews are you can't say you're not getting an interview. You said we match this, you'll interview them. So there's stages that identify training needs, and I think that ties in quite well to KPIs, because then you can actually have different KPIs for different people. Somebody might only need to win 10 jobs to fill 8. Why KPI them in 20 jobs? They're going to spend their time finding 25 jobs instead of filling the 10 they've got.
Absolutely right. Really good example. So there's a key thing there, first of all, is assume nothing. Don't just copy from the past.
Yeah, absolutely.
Linked to that, I think that a lot of people just inherit their pricing structure. So for as long as I can remember, the norm in the recruitment industry has been to charge a percentage of the salary of people that you place on. Why? Do we actually do twice the work to pay someone on 60k that we do on 30k?
No, I'm so glad you said that. I've never had this conversation with anyone publicly, but internally people know I am so against percentage of salary. So we work with recruiters as a business, and they say we'll only charge you 20% of this. I'm saying now it's in your interest to get them to be paid more because you want more money. You're not working for me then, you're working for the candidate. We should be having a conversation about what are you going to do and what do you want paid for that. So I totally agree that's a very, very good point that people miss.
And if you've got your proposition sorted out, there's a reverse argument, isn't there, that says, look, Mr. Client, Miss Client, pick your own price. So it depends how much skin you're willing to put in the game. For example, if you are happy to see me, give me interview slots, work with me exclusively, the fee will be X. And X is your lowest price because that's a bird in the hand. You can fill it. Now, obviously, this relies on you having a really good candidate network and being good skilled in all other aspects of your job. If, on the other hand, Mr. Client, you are putting this vacancy out with 5 agencies, then the fee is going to be X plus Y, because it's a risk, because we don't know that we're going to fill it. And I've also seen people successfully, for example, put a cap or offer a fixed fee, because they've productized and they've said, this is what we will deliver. It doesn't cost us any more to deliver it for a 50k than a 40k candidate, or we'll give you peace of mind that there's a cap there no matter what we negotiate for the candidate. So there's no conflict of interest as far as the client and recruiter are concerned. In terms of pricing, again, people inherit their rebate structures.
Rebate structures is a big thing as well. When you're talking about the pricing, when you mentioned there, the kind of you pick your own price, there's I see a very easy halfway house there. So if we touched on productizing there, if you have your price for go to the market, find CVs, telephone interview and send them, and you only get paid on contingent, you have bullet points of what you provide for that payment and that payment structure. You then have that second product, they get a bit more and a bit more and a bit more, but then when the client negotiates with you and says, I want that product but I'm going to pay 15%, you say, no problem, for 15% we take these services off and you get that. Say, no, I want that. So okay, well, which lever do you want to pull? Which service do you not want? Obviously it all costs money and I'm happy to be creative with you, but I can't just give you things for free. Like, we're running a business, you're running a business. I listened to a podcast actually on a run yesterday, and it was a sales podcast, but it was a very eloquent way that the guy put it. He said, when you're negotiating on price and the client tries to negotiate with you on price, you say, okay, look, I'm happy to get creative with the price. There are 4 levers that you can pull, that we can get creative on. First one is volume. You give us more volume, that's beneficial for us. Payment terms, so you pay us quickly or up front or anything else, that again is a good thing for us. What was the other ones? It was volume, it was payment terms, it was length of contract. So this was a software thing I was listening to, but translate that into recruitment. So it was, if you're doing a 3-year contract rather than a 2-year contract, that's better for us. And there was these levers that you pull, and it made the client take control. And they said, okay, well, if you want a better deal, we can do that for you. You just need to know there's some come and go. And I thought that was a really eloquent way of putting it.
We do see a lot of less experienced recruiters getting sucked into a conversation that's purely about pounds.
Yeah.
And actually there's a lot more variables involved there. But just to go back to rebate terms, most of the recruiters that I work with start from a sort of 13-week basis. Some of them vary slightly on that. Actually, 13 weeks if you're placing at executive level doesn't say much about your brand, does it? Yeah. Most permanent clients don't make a judgment about the quality of that placement until 6 months or a year down the line. And if your process really is as good as you say it is, and you're satisfied that it's delivering great hires, then why not put your money where your mouth is? Why not say, look, I've got one client of mine found he had nothing to lose because when he went back and did all his post-placement follow-up, all these people were there after a year. Yeah. Or they'd been promoted, which is a really great outcome.
You can make that, you could formalise that a little bit more. I'm always I'm a big believer in having a set of rules that is, that shows you what good looks like. So the reasons for candidates leaving are very important. So you say, look, we'll put a year's rebate in. However, can we categorise that at what point, if they leave, what is our fault? And what can we not control? So if, for example, I'm just making something up on the spot, but for example, you say, look, we're going to have to make that department redundant. We've done all our work. We've found that good position that if you're making a whole department redundant, that can't be on us for a whole department's shortcomings when we've found the person you wanted us to find. So if you can set those rules out early, your risk is diminished again.
Yeah. Absolutely. I do a lot of work with clients with my clients, recruitment business owners, on their terms, and even something as simple as that can make a difference. So I would often recommend that people exclude anything that may potentially be unfair dismissal, any redundancy situation, and they exclude those from their rebate terms. And on the flip side, that they also put a clause in their terms that say, before instructing us, you, the client, have investigated whether there are any candidates either in your ATS or your current workforce that might be interested in this job. Yeah.
Oh, very good.
And it's a very reasonable condition before you start work on an assignment, isn't it? Yeah. Absolutely. So that's an example of non-tech innovation, evolution, if you will. A couple of other interesting ones that I've observed are the better use of psychometrics. And for anybody who isn't first-hand on psychometrics, we're not just talking about what people call personality tests here.
Yeah. Colour they are.
We are also covering aptitude tests and job-specific test questionnaires, and there's all sorts of developments. For example, gamification of tests so that they're not just based on self-reporting. The average cost of them has come down substantially, and there's some very interesting providers.
I'm interested to know, because this is learning for me. So as an outsider who probably inexperience tells me that most of them are aimed at personality tests, what other hidden things do people not realise that psychometrics can give you?
Right. So the biggest classification is what they call aptitude tests. Right. In other words, we're doing an objective test where there are right answers. Okay. Yeah. Usually based around things like verbal and linguistic aptitude and or problem solving. Yeah. Right, okay. So there's a limit to how long you can get people to sit through tests. So they need to be, short, functional, and importantly, you need to understand exactly what the relevance of that test is to the job that you're recruiting for. Too often, what I see is people just tack on a psychometric as a sort of luxury item, like having your towels folded into the shape of swans or something, and there's an extra charge for it at the end. It's sort of belt and braces. Actually, you can do some really good work by introducing low-cost psychometrics much earlier in the process, and then saying to your client, look, Mr. Client, I know you asked for things I can read off a CV, a certain number of years experience, a level of qualification, this kind of thing. But actually, we can say from this objective test that this person has the skill set, the aptitude, it might be the numerical ability, for example, to do your job better than this other guy whose CV might match what you've described slightly better. Yeah. So you can end up with a completely different shortlist if you bring aptitude tests in successfully.
You mentioned about how important it was to pick the right one for the job. How do you determine that?
Right. Well, there's the traditional method, which is to actually run some tests on the existing workforce.
Oh, that's good.
And that can benchmark, successful. So I've done this myself when I was running a quite substantial recruitment company. I had enough historical data to say, okay, so we know who has overperformed since hiring, who's an average performer and who's underperformed. And we had enough data to taken at the point where we were hiring those individuals to see where the correlations were. And actually, we slightly changed the profile of people that we looked for as a result of that exercise. The other way, which is less time consuming and maybe easier to implement, is to actually just get all the stakeholders and have a conversation with them. So recruiters often make the mistake of dealing only with one person in their client organisation, don't they? And very few hiring decisions are just made by one person these days. So let's say there are 3 people who are actually involved. Those people might end up doing the first, second, third interviews or the final sign-off. And actually, because they've never had the conversation, they may have a fundamental disagreement about, for example, what good communication skills look like, or what confidence looks like, those kind of things. And so client 1 passes the candidate through to the next stage of the process. Client 2 meets them and thinks, why on earth has my colleague forwarded this person? Actually, if you can have that conversation with all 3 parties, say, well, why is this skill important? How do you see the job? What's it got to deliver? You are actually ironing out any potential issues about different views of the job.
One of the things that I just want to add to that for the listeners, because I think it's something we've learned very recently, as in the last few days, it was a light bulb moment for us. A good thing as a software company, we want to make sure all the decision makers that we want to be there are there at the demo. And if you say who else is involved in the decision making process, it gets people's back up and they go, oh, it's all me. It's me that makes the decisions here. You do what you're supposed to do for me. And it's the same in recruitment, and you want to know who else is involved. They're quite cagey about telling you, and a very, very good question to ask when you're in that very first discovery of, okay, we're going to nail the brief. Before you start, who's going to be disappointed that they missed this meeting? It's a really nice question. Really nice question. It gives you an idea. Oh, John's on holiday just now, or Jessica's out at a meeting just now. That's fine. What we'll do is we'll bring her back in. We'll relay what we've made, what we've got to, and we'll see if she agrees. And it brings you to that consultative approach to say, I know what I'm doing. I've done this before, without having to be too pushy. So from bringing those,
I like that phrasing. That's really good. So a couple of other innovations, developments that I've worked with clients with. That have been successful are introducing statement of works business. Now that's come way up a lot of people's agenda because of the IR35 issue, but depending on the market you work in and how deep your knowledge of it is, that can be an absolute game changer. What I would say on statement of works is that you have to actually be able to define the works very carefully. So if we just build on the idea we were talking about earlier about productizing traditional recruitment services, actually with statement of works you have to be able to say this is where the works begin and end, because you've got to price it accurately, and in that pricing you've got to allow for wastage in terms of travel, defects, whatever, service absence, sickness, unable to deliver services, all of those things, even your meeting time. So you've got to really understand what's going on at nitty-gritty level, and what the people that you've been hiring are actually delivering in order to do that successfully. Some of my clients have gone a step further on the traditional recruitment business by providing dashboards or some sort of more sophisticated reporting to their clients, either live, i.e. while assignments are being worked, in terms of progress within each assignment, or by supplying summary data at the end of an assignment. For example, it might be feedback on the employer brand, feedback on what advertising sources worked for them, even in one case providing a talent pool with candidates' permission at the end of the process into the client. So all of those things can be priced for, and it does depend what your client values, doesn't it?
So I was just about to say, so it's all about value, and delivering more value to the client. I think if we relate this dashboard idea back to KPIs, it's your KPIs on the client, as long as that data, we've agreed that data is important, and what that data would translate to in pounds and pence, I think it's a great idea. It's just to make sure that it's not a dashboard for dashboard's sake.
Exactly.
And I think that's that leans towards the tech innovation, quote unquote, rather than we're truly innovating your process, we're innovating, adding value to your services, our services.
And that actually takes us neatly to successfully implementing change like this, because dashboard, bells, whistles, whatever, for their own sake, just as novelty, rarely make any profitable impact on a recruitment business, don't they? So I know that at Odro you put a lot of emphasis on training people to build the new service into their proposition. What other tips would you have in terms of successful implementation of change?
So I'll always go on setting the success criteria early at the start. The very beginning, you have to say, what does good look like at 3 months? What does it look like at 6? And what does it look like at 12? If you don't have that, you can't say if it was good or bad at these points. It's very easy to forget about it and just say, we're getting caught up in this wave, it's really exciting, let's just go. But for everyone involved, if they don't know what they're aiming for, how do you expect them to take the shot? So I think it's very important to set that. I also think continuous development, continuously checking in. There was an adage that someone told me a long time ago about training, and they said, I went for golf lessons, and the golf pro put a ball down on the tee, and he said, right, take a swing. And I took a swing, and he said, okay, lean all your weight on your left foot. Turn your grip inside, move your hands 4 millimetres apart, move your elbow back, make sure it lines up with your right foot, swing through as hard as you can, make sure your right hand's facing the sky when you do that, and make sure you're looking straight ahead and don't lift your head.
That's a lot.
Okay, and he said, right, now put a ball down, right, okay, go hit a shot, and I hit a shot, right, okay, you left it, and all the way through. And you go to another golf pro, and he puts the ball down on the tee, and he says, take a shot. I took a shot, and he said, put all your weight on your left foot, and take 100 shots. How does that feel? Feels quite good. Right, now turn your hand in. And that's the way to get people to buy into change and feel the difference as you go. And that's where I relate that back to continuous development. You can't tell them everything in one go because they'll forget the important parts, or at least some of them. So start with the easy wins. Get in what's the most impactful low-hanging fruit. So for example, for a low-hanging fruit for Odro, is who here, if we were in the training room, we say, who here has lost a candidate because the client took too long to give you feedback? Every hand goes up. Okay, those clients are the ones that you pitch your new video service to, because you've got a pain point related to that you can solve. Bingo, that's it, no more. Let's focus on that. How did that feel? It was good, or they said this, okay, we'll talk them through that. So this continuous development and any implementation has to be done in the right way. You can't just put loads of information on someone and then hit them with a hammer until they've learned it. So
it's a really good point, well made, isn't it? That training is a continuous process, and just telling people once is not going to change. And the hardest people to change are the people who have a successful, moderately successful recruitment practice, don't they? So I'm a big fan of visual reminders, ongoing training, even making the new product a KPI. As long as you pointed out, it's not just loading more work onto people. And it doesn't matter how much training you provide, managers have to implement it at desk, don't they?
Absolutely.
Really important.
Absolutely, I do.
Okay. So just one other thought, and that's about employer branding. So I had a client a couple of months ago who said, I do employer branding. I said, tell me about that. What it actually involved was him sitting in a room with his client saying, let me tell you what I think about your employer brand. And do you know what? Actually, the guy had some valuable insights, but there was no rigour to it at all. And if you think about what a true brand consultancy will do, there will be objective measures, they will do some comparative analysis with other brands that are competitors, they'll perhaps do some surveys and so forth to base their opinions on. So it's not just somebody sharing their opinions and trying to charge for it, is it?
I think everyone, but employer brand right now is something I'm a very big believer in, because people can now find out a hell of a lot more about you than they used to through social networks and things. And if someone is considering looking, I don't know, we should really focus on building an employer brand. Unfortunately, what they don't know is they already have an employer brand. That's always there. Everyone does have one, whether you like it or not. You have one, and you need to. If you think that it needs work, you need to start now. Employer branding is a massive thing.
Yeah. Okay. So there we have some. Thank you very much for just shooting the breeze with me there, Ryan.
Thank you.
We have some thoughts, some technical, some non-technical about how you can evolve your recruitment business, and for practical implementation. Please do contact me, Alison Humphries at Recruitment Leadership, or if you'd like to talk to Ryan in more detail about Odro, I'm sure he'd be happy to hear from you. So thank you very much for listening. This has been the Recruitment Leadership Podcast, Season 3. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, review and share so that others can find the podcast too. We really appreciate your support. If you have any questions about the topics covered or wish to find out more about recruitment leadership, please email alison@recruitmentleadership.co.uk, referencing the podcast. We're also on LinkedIn, where you can follow Recruitment Leadership and connect with Alison Humphries. Thank you for listening, and we hope you join us next time for another episode of the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.